gaffes are some that live in perpetuity, and no one is exempt. There have been a lot of those, and especially controversy as a result of tweets and other posts. Joining me tonight is social media analyst and president of Ruby Media Group, Kris Ruby. Thanks so much for joining us. I guess we've got to start with the latest gaffe. Senator Marco Rubio tweeting that picture, his avatar, changing it, trying to at least pay some respect to Congressman John Lewis, but instead he posted a picture of himself with Elijah Cummings. Some would call that careless. Others would call that disrespectful.
I mean, I think we could call it both. It is careless. It is disrespectful. I'm not sure how that could ever sort of get past a social media team or anyone else. I mean, it's just very obvious, in my opinion, that mistake. And so I think, and what's even crazier is that he wasn't the only one that made this mistake. I believe there were two senators that made the same exact mistake. So I think in the political climate that we are in today in America, to make a social media mistake like that is really not okay.
Yeah, Dan Sullivan, senator for Alaska, also making that mistake. But how does that happen? Is that Marco Rubio that changes his avatar? Is that somebody else? I mean, and how do you recover from that if you can? We've seen Marco Rubio have a slew of gaffes. And we should also point out that Mr. Lewis had once said that he planned on growing a beard in an attempt to avoid being repeatedly mistaken for Congressman Elijah Cummings. So both men knew that sometimes they could be confused, but it continues to happen. And we've seen this when Aretha Franklin died, her picture being mistaken. Why?
Why? I'm not sure why. I mean, I can't say why unless it really is just sort of careless errors on their part. And so it's not clear to me if they are posting it themselves or if they have a third-party team or a third-party agency that's responsible for it. But there's no actual reason where I can say that this is why it happens, because it shouldn't happen. I mean, the bottom line is that there's no reason why this should happen anymore. It's very clear who someone is, and to sort of just swap out a photo like that is really not any sort of way to pay respect to someone. So I think what we have to do is make sure, whether it's you are in charge of your social media or someone else is in charge of your social media, please fact check before anything goes up.
Right. And Kristen, in this, move, there really isn't a lot of room for error. And you have someone like Nick Cannon coming out, spewing anti-Semitic hate and comments. And then you have people like Puff Daddy or P. Diddy and others who come out and support him. And Nick Cannon himself losing quite a number of opportunities, of jobs, of dollars because of what he said. He at first seemed like he didn't want to apologize. He was going to stick to his guns. Then it seemed like it really hit him. This was going to affect his pocket, and he did apologize. Can you recover from that in the climate that we're in?
I don't necessarily think you can recover from something like that, from what Nick Cannon did. I mean, Nick Cannon made anti-Semitic remarks, and there are some that believe that P. Diddy or anyone else sort of shouldn't be coming to his defense or saying you have an opportunity with us after saying things like that. There are many people that are very unhappy with what Nick Cannon said and think that, the cancel culture in this regard has not gone far enough, and that there's a double standard in terms of the cancel culture with Nick Cannon's anti-Semitic remarks. And so many are still waiting for others from main organizations to sort of really stand up against what Nick Cannon said, and don't think that they have done that yet. So many are still waiting for that.
But how do we define cancel culture, really? Because it seems like this line is so ambiguous. A lot of people get booted. We see people like, say, Megyn Kelly. And then in this case, say, Nick Cannon does survive. And yet, some would say his comments were far worse, and they were clearly hateful. They were clearly anti-Semitic. So is there a line, and is there a double standard?
Yes, there is definitely a double standard when it comes to cancel culture and what we see on the right and the left. And so I think that there are certain things that, the left is ready to pounce on when it comes to someone from the right saying it. And I don't think that really works in the reverse. So there's major challenges around that. How do you define cancel culture? It's a great question. And unfortunately, you can't, because what happens is it's a moving target in terms of what people want to cancel. And so it has to do with people decide that they don't like you, they don't like your brand, you've said something that they disagree with, your product has made a statement they disagree with, and sort of what determines what gets canceled is really the market. The market is the ultimate arbiter of what gets canceled, and on Twitter. So whoever has the loudest voice seems to be able to cancel those pop culture icons, or lack thereof.
It's interesting because we talk about cancel culture, we immediately think of people, especially public figures, but then there's also the brands that you mentioned. In this case, the Washington football team, which has in just the last 30 days seems to just face controversy after controversy. First the name controversy, then that huge break from the Washington Post last week with all those allegations of at least 15 employees who faced sexual harassment behind closed doors there at the Washington football team offices. Can a brand like that really recover?
I think that's going to be very hard for them to recover. So in terms of crisis communications and PR strategy management, you can recover when you are dealing with one or two things. But when that continues to snowball from one thing to the next issue to the next crisis, it becomes overbearing, it becomes too much. And so my fear here is that they were already dealing with a lot of controversy. Now you add this on top of that, and it's too much. So I don't necessarily believe that they can recover for that, and I think they really need to stay out of the public eye right now and deal with, you know, their own issues.
Would a fresh name really create a clean slate for them?
Yeah. No, I don't think a fresh name cannot create a clean slate for them. And, you know, I had very similar point of view and perspective when it came to Aunt Jemima, another brand that was in the news lately for cancel culture. My whole remark about Aunt Jemima is that it's not just changing a logo. If you truly care about your customers, you should be considering not only a logo change, but also a product reformulation. The customers, the health of your customers should matter to you as a brand just as much as the logo of the brand. And so if true brand change is changing it, not only the name, the product, and that you care about the people you're selling that product to. And that's simply not what I saw with that move.
And there's no question that the dialogue continues. The controversies will always be there, and I'm sure you will always have a job with this trying to mitigate all these crises. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Still ahead on Michigan College.